first and foremost, I want to thank the EKPA for allowing me to have the opportunity to sort your shows. Definitely was a good show. Look forward to being able to discuss our classes, and it was just kind of nice for for a show pig guy to kind of step out of his comfort zone and get into a breed that's really interesting when you really start to break them down and do some research. I think a really cool opportunity for me, so I'm thankful I have that opportunity to sort through your guys' show. I think we get into the under 100 in the market class, and I think there's one for me that needs to win, and that's entry number 1. I think one that just comes with some stoutness of feature. I think one that's got some muscle. I think a bear that's really bold and pliable through the center portion of his body. I love his look from the side. I think he's extremely stout in terms of his feature. I think one that gets out and motors extremely well off of both ends. From there, and he's going to be our champion. I think from there, our reserve champion, I'm going to go to entry number 4. I think another heavyweight kind of a bear for me. Yeah, we need to probably give him some more muscle, but I still think out here he's extremely good, and in terms of his structure, I love his length of side. I think for, the shape that we talk in this breed, I think he's adequate in terms of his snout shape, really level in terms of his back. Probably could open him up a little bit right there at the base of his chest floor and as he turns and goes, but I still think one that complements our class winner extremely well. And third is going to be entry number 3. And I think between 2 and 3 was kind of a close pair, but I think what sorts these two hogs is when you just get them off to the side. I think the 3 bear is a little longer in terms of his pasterns. I think he takes just a shot more comfortable stride off both ends of his skeleton. And I think one that when you get in behind him, I think he's a shot wider and just has more squareness about him when you study him from hip to ground. And then we're going to round out the class with entry number 2. Like this one from the side, in terms of his upheadedness and his look, for me, we just need to fix him. He wants to concave just ever so slightly in terms of his hock, wants to close up there, and unfortunately, he's probably the narrowest at the base of his chest floor and wants to carry that on back. We get into the 100 and 150 pound class, and I think there's a champion that wins pretty handily, and that's going to be entry number 8. I think the black gilt really is presented extremely well in terms of her skin and hair, and I think that further complements herself. I think a gilt that's just extremely loose and just free about her structure. I love her angles up front in terms of her shoulder, her front knee. I think she's a really level-backed individual, and she goes away from you with plenty enough muscle. You step off to the side of her, and I think she's got plenty enough arch and curvature to the upper part of her rib. She's really soft and pliable about the center portion of her body. Really like this gilt to win this heat. Second is going to be entry number 5, and I think a gilt that brings a lot to the table just in terms of her structure. I think you get off to the side of her. I love her balance. She's extremely level about her top line. Yeah, we could probably bring her up in terms of her tail set, maybe give her a shot more muscle and lower stifle, but still, I think depth of body's in check. I think she's full and open about her heart. I think a gilt that's really good in terms of her rib shape. Like we talked, if we could fix her, I'd like to bring her up in terms of her tail set. I'd like to just make her a little leveler out of her hip and in her pin set. For me, in third is going to be entry number 7, and a gilt that really intrigues me in terms of her head shape. She's a little longer faced. She's a little shorter bodied, and I think that maybe it works to her disadvantage. I mean, she is extremely big. She's bold about the center portion of her body. She's probably the one that comes at you the widest and squarest about her chest floor. And I think that works to her disadvantage when you study her in terms of her knee set. She wants to get more concaved in terms of her knee, and then she turns and goes. Same thing for kind of her hock. She wants to turn in a little bit out of her hock, but still, I think a really nice gilt just in terms of the center portion of her body and her boldness. I think we fix her in her knee and her hind leg. I think that gilt can definitely rival the two ahead of her. And we're going to round out the class with entry number 6, and a gilt that you just got to appreciate in terms of her broodiness. I mean, she is extremely long-bodied. She's got some depth of body, but I think for me, after that, she's pushing a little bit too much in terms of her jowl, and I know that's kind of the breed, but we need to bring her back in her condition. We need to give her a shot more muscle for her to work any higher. My compliments to the exhibitors. We get into the 150 to 200 pound market class, and I think the red and black one, entry number 10, needs to be our champion. I think one that's extremely stout when he hits the surface. He's big-footed. He's got a big motor laid in him in terms of his hind leg. He's still got some muscle. I think one, you study him up top, and I think he's extremely wide-backed. He's pulled apart about his plates. I think a really deep-bodied barrow, but, we could probably fix him in terms of his gland, pull him back in terms of condition when you study him right behind his sheath. But as you can tell, as he goes in the sawdust pile, he's extremely athletic. Bear that wants to have some fun here in the video, but I think you study him going away from him. He's extremely square. He's a really wide-based individual. Really like this bear to start. I think in second is going to be entry number 12, and I think one that complements our class winner in terms of that one's muscle and shape. For me, that one goes second. That one just needs to stouten that one up in terms of his feature when he hits the surface, in terms of his foot size. But another one that's extremely wide back. He's big pinned. For me, maybe the gilt just need to fix her right there in terms of her balance up high, in terms of levelness from blade to hip, and bring her up in terms of her tail set for her to rival our class winner. And third is going to be entry number 9. And I really like this one at first glance. I think this one's extremely flexible when the young lady gets her drove. But after that, I think we need to fix that one, stouten him up in terms of his feature, make him bigger and bolder in terms of his forearm. I like to see him a shot wider as he turns and goes for him to work up any higher. We're going to round out the class with entry number 11, and I think this gilt brings a lot to the table in terms of her depth of body. For me, she needs to be stouter in terms of her ankle, need to stouten her up in terms of her hind leg structure, and just for me, just need to bring her up in terms of her front shoulder, give her a shot more muscle for her to work up any higher. My compliments to these exhibitors. We get into our last division in the market classes in the 200 plus, and our champion is going to be entry number 13, and I think one that's just study that one up front in terms of the angle to his shoulder. I think he's a really big four-armed rascal that definitely hits the surface. He's big in terms of his foot and his forearm. You work your way back. He's extremely soft and pliable to the center portion of his body while still having some muscle, still has some stifle shape. If I could fix him anywhere, I'd like to see him shot square in terms of his hock, maybe bring him up in terms of his tail set, but I still think one that needs to win this particular heat. Reserve champion in second is going to be entry number 16, and I think this gild is really good just in terms of her balance and her body cavity and just her shape. I think she's opened up about her heart and her forerib, really big and soggy and pliable through the center portion of her body. I think for me, where she goes second, she just doesn't have enough muscle, doesn't have enough turn and shape right out of the backside of her shoulder. Probably need to bring her back in terms of her condition, in terms of her jowl, and where she study her just in terms of going away from it. I'd like to see her a shot wider as she turns and goes. Third's going to be entry number 14, and I think 14 and 16 kind of go back and forth when you study that pair and where you want to put your priorities. And I think for me, I think where 14 needs to go third, I think that one just closes up too much when you study that one go away from you. A little bit more hesitant in terms of her step. Maybe when the young lady gets her out and gets her driving, I think she's a little bit more confident in the way that she steps. But I think for me, if we could just get her out and make her motor a shot better, probably would have rivaled the one ahead of her. But I still think she also brings some stuff to the table just in terms of her pin width, in terms of her shape, and just her pliability through the center portion of her body. I think she's opened up. Her balance is extremely well. Like we talked, we just need to fix her right there, just make her more relaxed, just a little bit more looser out of her hip and her hind leg for her to move up any higher. And fourth is going to be entry number 15, and kind of the one the same. I think this individual right here probably pushes the limits in terms of her cover for me. I think a gilt that really wants to duck and roll out of her pin. She gets really closed up in terms of her face and her snout. She's just pushing a little too much condition for me and where I am in terms of market classes. Just need to give her some more muscle, give her a little bit more shape for her to work up. And we're going to round out the class with entry number 17. And Really, you can appreciate this one just from a levelness of back standpoint. But after that, that one's just not my kind. Just in terms of being too far forward, in terms of her blade, that one just wants to get a little bit more jammed up front. Really wants to duck out of those pins. Needs a shot more muscle. Just need to open her up off either end for her to work any higher. My compliments to these exhibitors. Going back through my class winners, I think for me, the one that just puts it all together is entry number 10. That one's going to be our grand champion market. And I think this one, like we talked earlier, just has the shape. He's got the muscle. He's got the mobility to just have so much comfort and ease as that one gets around in this young person's barn. And yeah, we talked about, yeah, we could probably clean him up in terms of his sheet, but I still think just in terms of real world market traits, I mean, that one's got some muscle, he's got shape, he's got stoutness of forearm, like this one a good deal. That one's going to, entry number 10 is going to be your grand champion. I think for reserve and third, kind of have some back and forths for me and just where you want to lay your priorities. But for me, our reserve is going to be entry number 8. And we talked about this one just in terms of this one's skin and hair and being presented extremely well. Yeah, I would probably like to see the video a little bit closer, but I think the young person does an extremely good job of getting her drove. I think she complements our class winner just in terms of type and kind. She's got some muscle. She's got some shape. I think where she just kind of runs into a buzzsaw just in terms of having a shot more muscle. But I think from the look from the side, I think she's still pulled apart in terms of her blades. I really like that attribute about her. We just probably need to open her up just a shot to the base of her chest, open her up as she turns and goes. But I still like that one second best. And I think for me, the one that goes third that probably reads with the most futuristic character comes out of our under 100, and that's going to be entry number 1. It's going to be third overall. I think this bear brings a lot to offer. He's big in terms of his forearm. He's big when he hits the grass surface. Still got plenty enough muscle. Just really like where his shoulder lays in him. He's got some length and extension ahead of his blade. Yeah, we could probably fix him in terms of, maybe pushing a little bit up in terms of his jowl. But I still think that's a really, really good pig to go third. So entry number 10 is going to be our grand champion. Entry number 8 is going to be our reserve. And entry number 1 is going to be our third overall. My congratulations to these exhibitors.